watching the Forefront Church video podcast. And wherever you're at viewing online, we just want to say thank you and welcome. And one of the ways that we can help connect with you is we want to hear from you and where you're at and how we can help. And so head over to forefrontchurch.info after the message and click the Connect tab. It's a great way for us to help you along your spiritual journey as you connect with God and learn about Jesus. And so sit back, relax. We hope that you're challenged and encouraged from today's message.
Well, hey, welcome to the very last day of 2017. Give yourselves a round of applause. Awesome. So my name is Dan. I'm not the normal guy that's up here. Usually it's Jason, but he's taking some well-deserved time off. Jason is the guy who did the video at the beginning. You know, the one who looks like Yukon Cornelius from Rudolph. That's him. And he's not here, so, you know, it might get a little crazy here. I don't know. But he's out today. So welcome. I'm really glad you're here, and we've made it to the end of another new year, another year. I don't know what you think about 2017. You might be sitting there going, man, I'm glad that's over with. Or you might be going, man, that year was awesome, you know. Or you might be like, it just was, you know. So you might be sitting here looking at the new year going, man, I'm really excited about the new year. You know, got some plans, got some things I'm thinking about, you know. But for others of you, it may just be another day on the calendar. You might be like, you know, I got to work tomorrow. I'm not really all that happy. So, but for me, New Year's Day took on a very different meaning 26 years ago tomorrow when this little person entered our lives. And that is my youngest, who is going to be 26 tomorrow. So that's what happened to us on New Year's Day 26 years ago. So she went from that terrifying infant photo, which those things always amuse me, to an almost equally terrifying photo of her handing out donuts at our Christmas Adams service. So, but she held it down and did a great job. And I always wondered, why the heck did we do New Year's Day? Because she was induced. It wasn't like, boom, it happened. You know, we actually planned that. I have no idea. It was so long ago, I have no idea. Anyway, that's my New Year's Day. We celebrate that every year, and we're really thrilled about that. So many people look at the end of the year as sort of a closing out, and we might be looking at the New Year as sort of a redo, a do-over. We're kind of happy about it. It might just be a chance to take a deep breath, you know. And I don't know what you'll do tonight. You know, it's like 11 degrees in Times Square tonight. Somebody told me that they actually have to assemble there now, you know, and then they're going to watch the ball drop, and it's going to be midnight. But you know what tonight is? Like, this is, like, you think the ball dropping is something? No, tonight is like when you get the greatest compilation of lip-synced music than any other night of the year. On every single station, you're going to see people who are pretending to sing their hits, and they're all going to sound amazing. Except I did hear Mariah singing live, so, you know, there's that. So if you want to stay up for that, you can. I don't know, but sorry, Mariah. But some of you might take it in very quietly. You might go to bed early, whatever it is that you do. But at some point, you might ask, now what? You might wake up in the morning. Maybe you won't be feeling very well. I don't know. That's your business. But you might be going, now what? But we say now what all the time, don't we? So here's what I want to do. And I know it's early. And I know it's New Year's Eve day. But you walked in here, and Jason's not here, so I'm on my own. So here's what I want to ask you. I want you to think about something. I want you to think about a heavy sort of question. Instead, when you start to think about this now what idea, what I want you to do is I want you to think about, what do I build my life on? Heavy question. What is your foundation from which you live your life out of? In every little now what of your life, when decisions need to be made, when the good and the bad happens, when you arrive at a crossroads and you're standing in the middle between a path and a new opportunity, and you ask, now what? What is your foundation? See, because I think most of the time we ask ourselves what we're going to do instead of where we'll do it from. Like every 10 minutes on TV, the fine people at Peloton have been telling me what I need to do. I need to get on their bike and I need to follow some sweaty dude on a screen for an hour. Okay? Maybe I don't need to be doing that. What I'm going to do may not be as important as where I'm going to do it from. So I want to hit you with kind of the takeaway so that if you've decided at some point in the next couple of minutes where you don't want to be here, you can get up and leave. That's no problem, but I want you to walk away with this. This is a takeaway in all seriousness that we give every week, and this is the question. This is the statement. It's not what I do, perhaps, but maybe where I'm doing it from that's important. It's not what I do, but where I'm standing when I decide what to do. Think about that for a second. What is our going in position? Where are we coming from? Certainly you've had a conversation once or twice in your life where you've sat there and you go, I'm not really sure where you're coming from. Could you tell me where you're coming from? Or you may have had the opposite where you've had a conversation and you said, let me explain to you where I'm coming from. That's what I'm talking about. I think if we had a fundamental understanding of where we're coming from, where we're launching off from, we would do things very, very differently. So we're going to take a little piece of a section of the Bible in the book of Matthew where Jesus is speaking, and we're going to talk about this now what idea. Now, if you're new with us today, or you're new to church and you're new to God, or maybe somebody dragged you here, or you had nothing else to do today and you walked in here, I'm really, really glad you're here. You inspire me. I'm thankful that you're here. And the other thing I want to tell you, I want to take this time that I've been given today, and I want to tell you about a God who loves you and cares about you. And in this now what question, and over the next 25, 26 minutes, I want you to hear that from me, how much God loves you and how much he cares about you. And each week I want you to know that we go to the Bible to teach from. That's our where we're coming from position. See, we would say that the Bible is God's story to us and about us. And what I've found is that no matter what my now what question has been, I will find the answer in the pages of his book. Now you might think, I'm getting everything I signed up for. Preacher man's telling me the Bible is important. Correct. But, fair enough, think about it. If the Bible is what it says it is, then it contains wisdom. Now, wisdom is a valuable thing. We all know that. We may not always like good wisdom because sometimes it kind of rubs up against what we really want to do. But if we admit it, we know that being wise is good for us, and the Bible contains that wisdom. Even if you're not down with the bigger God narrative, it would be a little intellectually dishonest to claim that the Bible doesn't have any wisdom in it. It does. So you should have a Bible of your own. And we have free Bibles we hand out every week. If you were to walk out of these doors at the end of service, walk past the restrooms, make a left, you should see a couple of people huddling by a space heater. They will help you at our Get Connected table get you a Bible of your very own. It's a tactile paper version of it. And there's also some great digital versions of the Bible that we want you to have as well. And you can go to forefrontchurch.info, which is kind of a one-stop shopping of all things Forefront, faith, etc. But it also contains a digital version of the Bible in there that you can use, and we want you to have that and to use it. It's where we go. It's where we're coming from. So before we get started further, let me pray. God, thank you for every single person who walked in here today. And I don't know what they're thinking about the last year, the new year, or any year for that matter. But I pray that they would hear one thing that you want them to hear, one little nugget that they can take with them and apply and maybe move forward in their lives in a little bit different manner. You've got a lot to say about now what. Please help us to understand what that is. We love you, and we pray this in your name. Amen. So in a couple minutes, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 7. What is that? Matthew is a section, a book of the Bible. It's actually the very first book of the New Testament of the Bible. If you've never seen a Bible before, the first large chunk of the Bible is the Old Testament, and the second, slightly smaller chunk is the New Testament. So you get to the end of the New Testament, and you'll get a blank page, and you might see something that says New Testament. You flip that page, and there's Matthew. Now, Matthew was a follower of Jesus. Matthew was a guy that was an eyewitness to what Jesus was about. In fact, Matthew was a guy that Jesus selected to follow him. He called him a disciple. So Matthew wrote his account of Jesus from Jesus' birth all the way through to his crucifixion and his resurrection. And what's kind of interesting about Matthew was a tax collector, which, I don't know what your feelings are of the IRS, but in that day, they were people that were very much looked down upon. But Matthew was the guy, and he penned his observations of Jesus, and he had a theme kind of the way that he looked at it. If you read about Jesus' life, what you read is that he is what is called the promised Messiah. Sounds strange. And all that means is that in the Old Testament writings, we read of the Jewish nation. And the Jewish nation actually predicted the arrival of Jesus as the promised Messiah. They didn't really know who he was going to be. They just knew something was coming. So that's Jesus. So right up until the point where we're going to be looking at today, just to give you a real quick survey of what's going on, Matthew chapter 1, birth of Jesus, the genealogy of his family. Chapter 2, we're talking about Jesus grows up. He starts to emerge as something that hasn't been seen before. He has an encounter with a guy about his age by the name of John the Baptist. John the Baptist reluctantly baptizes him because he knows who Jesus is. By chapter 3, he's growing up, he's teaching. In chapter 4, we find him in the wilderness with this character called the devil or Satan, who's testing him and almost torturing him. Near the end of that, he starts calling his disciples, Matthew and some of the other guys. He begins to teach very, very large crowds of people. And then in chapter 5, we have sort of this inaugural moment, this moment where Jesus steps to the fore and he starts telling everybody about God. And it's called the Sermon on the Mount. And what he said was that Jesus was going to come, that he was there to save and restore humanity. He taught about how we live a life with God, how to follow him. He taught about things like thankfulness. He taught about things like staying true to his teachings. He was telling the masses that this God who you know from the ancient Jewish literature loves you and cares about you. You can live for him. He talked about murder and divorce and adultery and honesty and love and hate. He talked about generosity and how to do that. He talked about how to pray. He talked about what we do with our wealth. He talked about that thing that we do all the time, which is worry. And he talked about how we can be judgmental. See, if you want to know what God thinks and desires for humanity, this is a great section to read. But then we get to chapter 7, and Jesus tells us that we are wise when we take those words and we put them into practice. And he teaches us by using kind of a construction illustration. And it's going to be up here on the screen in Matthew chapter 7, 24 through 27. And remember, we're after the now what explanation. Starting in verse 24, and this is what he says. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. See, Jesus said that putting his words into action is like a wise man who builds a house on a solid, immovable foundation. It's like saying, he said that when you're going to build your life, build it on a solid, immovable foundation, because there will be storms. We know here in our area, weather changes very frequently. Rain, wind, maybe snow. We know that if our homes are not built well, they won't survive. If our lives are not built well on a solid foundation, we won't survive. What he's saying here is, and we ask now what? We need to be standing on a rock so that when we decide, behave, act, and live, that we do it from a foundation. It's a very simple illustration, but very, very powerful. And he's saying not just any foundation, but a foundation that can withstand, that could withstand temptation, difficulty, anger, dishonesty. But he also says that if we know what he says and we decide to act independent, that's fine. We might as well be in sand. We set ourselves up for difficulty. So this is the answer to the now what question. In everything that we're doing, in carrying out our lives every day, we have to decide on a course of action. It doesn't matter what it is. It's every little thing that you do. A behavior, a choosing of your words, choosing a job, choosing a spouse, maybe even choosing whether to remove someone from life support. Jesus is saying that we should do this from his place, his words. Or we can listen to the wisdom and say, nah, I got this. So let me drive this home a little bit. So this is sand. If it were not in this bag, it would be all over the place. That's what sand is. It's not very good for anything but kind of, enjoying on a sunny day, on a warm day. This is all of the things that God doesn't have for us, doesn't want for us. These are things that we grasp onto that are not anywhere near what he wants for us. We have these all over our yards. This is just a paver, but it's an illustration. It's a rock. I want you to look at that as his words, his principles, his love for you, that you can stand on this no matter what it is. So when you start saying, now what? If you're standing on this, you're going to get the answer. That's exactly what that means. That's exactly what this story is talking about. Think back to this whole idea of New Year's. New Year's Day, this hope of the new year, is a big deal for many of us because what does it represent? It represents a promise that something might be better. All of the ridiculous, Nordic Track incline commercial, Bowflex, whatever, diets and everything else, those are things that feel good because they're an idea of a promise that if I do this, things will get better. I can stand on that, and this is what we do. It feels good. We're human beings. For as hopeless as we can be, we're awfully hopeful in these days because we look and we think it's going to be better this year if I just do this. If I grasp at a new diet or a new relationship or a new job or a relocation or any of the things that we grasp at, but really the action of grasping is just really like standing in sand because generally we're going for what we think is right instead of where we're coming from. So let me ask you from the story of the builder. What are you going to build your life on? What could your life look like if you built it on the rock? Have you ever considered really taking God at his word? And I faced that in my own life. It was about 20 years ago. And if you knew me 20 years ago, you wouldn't want to know me. It was a really, really bad time. I mean, I was completely lost. I didn't know really what I was doing with anything in my life, and I wasn't doing anything in my life really well. And I have no idea why I decided to do this, but it just occurred to me at some point, what about God? Now, I had never had any relationship with God prior to that. I didn't have any idea who Jesus was. I just knew I was very anti-church, anti-God, anti-anything. But I went and I bought a Bible at an old Heaven and Earth store that aren't around anymore, and I bought this Bible. This is the very first Bible that I ever purchased, and I don't know what told me to, but I did. And I came across a verse in Matthew, just a few chapters to the right of where we're at, Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, and I had just started reading this, and the verse said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." It was Jesus talking. And it was like being hit with a cinder block, I guess. But it was the first moment in my life, I was 37 at the time, it was the first moment in my life where I thought, maybe God loves me. Maybe he cares about me. So I started consuming this. I read it, and I took my family to church, and I've been doing that same practice for the better part of 20 years now. This was an absolute game changer for me. When I got in the habit of reading this and beginning to apply what it said, it radically changed my life. Now, here's what it didn't do. It didn't mean that I got everything right. There are a number of people in here who know me. They'll be very eager to tell you that I don't always get it right. And it doesn't mean that everything has gone well, because it hasn't. But you know what? In all of those situations, when I have felt like throwing in the towel, or I've found myself in sand, I've said, nope, that's not where I belong. And I've put myself back where I need to be, and it's been because of my daily interaction with what this book says. Let me ask you, have you ever considered what this book says about your life? Do you really know what this book says about you and your life? Some of you do. I know some of you very well, and I know what you do and how you consume what God has to say. I know that some of you used to and don't anymore. You're in the sand and you don't even know it. Some of you have never tried this before. And that's exciting to me because I know that if you gave that a shot, I know what you'll find. But I do know what all of us know how to do, and we all know how to walk in the sand because that's kind of what we go to. Wherever you are with the question, I'm just glad you're here to consider the implications of what that could do. See, when I came to realize that the more I learned about what he had to say, and I made that a habit, the more I found myself on a rocky place instead of sand. The more I changed, the more I sought solid footing, and over time, it became my default habit. Over time, I learned that sand is a lousy foundation to build buildings, and most importantly, a life. So what's the answer? All that said, if you and I were to sit down and have a cup of coffee together, I'd be more than happy to do so. And you were to ask me, Dan, what's the answer? How do I get the answer to the now what? What do I do? How could I make 2018 amazing? How do I get there? And I would tell you, whether it's the end of the year, the middle of the year, the beginning of the year, I would say I believe more than anything else that getting to know God is the best, most powerful way for you to find yourself on the rock and to live from a firm foundation. And the best way to do that is to take this book in whatever form works for you and consume it daily. Daily. Well, hold up. Did he just say daily? Daily. Really? Yeah. Really. Daily. Now, I don't know if I got time. Okay. Well, let's see if you have enough time. If you have ever heard the following terms, you have time. Binge watch. Fail army videos. Netflix. Pinterest. DraftKings. Streaming service. You have time. You have more time than you know. When am I going to tell you that the best time to do this is? Morning. Oh, no, that's deal breaker. I've heard all this. What do I hear? I ain't a morning person. Right, you're not a morning person. I've yet to hire anybody where I've sat down and I said, hey, I'd really like to offer this position. I think you'd be awesome for it. Here's a list of your responsibilities. We all arrive here at 8:30 and we leave at 5. I've never heard anybody say to me, whoa, 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 whoa. 8:30 just doesn't work for me. I'm not a morning person. I don't know if any of you have ever told a future employer that before. We don't say that. We make time for the things that are important. We will never default to something that we will not take the time to learn. That is a truth. We default to what we do consistently because we're human beings. A lot of people who come and talk to us or talk to our staff that are struggling and have problems. And I find the same thing, whether it's somebody who's followed God for a long time, not really sure, doesn't believe in God. What I really generally find is people don't engage the Bible. Even if they know they should. They don't do that. Too often, what we see people do when they find themselves in the sand is they do the opposite, because the opposite is what they're used to doing. And I don't say this to judge or condemn anybody because I've found myself in the sand before. But I do want to tell you the truth. All I'm bringing to bear today is my experience, my own personal experience, and a little bit of insight as to what I've seen here. And I'm telling you that this is the absolute most important thing I have ever done in my life that has given me any sense of who I am. You know, even if our life goes well and we decide to, hold up the couch with this or whatever, we find ourselves in the sand again because we think we don't need it. When you look at those verses that we went through in chapter 7, verse 24 says, "Therefore everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man." Practice. To handle our lives differently, we have to develop a different attitude. We have to decide to put his wisdom into practice. And you just won't sit there and go, that's wise. You're going to have to learn and start to default to things, and you won't default to things until they start to become a habit. Now, this is a great time of year for this. We already have some New Year's resolutions in your head, don't you? You've already decided what diet you're going to try tomorrow morning. Okay, I'm going to go. There'll be a whole bunch of people running around here tomorrow morning. You know what I'm talking about. But what's going to happen by February 10th? Ain't going to happen. Let me ask you a question. How many days in a row do you have to do something for it to become a habit? 21? Somebody said 30-something? Okay. The 21 day, you know where that came from? This is nuts. There was a plastic surgeon in the 50s who did a study, and he said it took 21 days for a person to not look at the plastic surgery they had done. So I did some research for you. There was a study done in London of 96 people over 12 weeks. Each of them wanted to start a new habit, whether it be a running program or some people wanted to drink more water, whatever it was. And they studied them over 12 weeks. The average time it took for whatever they wanted to do to become habit was 66 days. It ranged from 18 to 254 days, but the average was 66 days. Here's my point. If you start tomorrow and you make the decision that you're going to live your life on what this has to say, by March 7th, if you do it every single day, you'll be in the habit of reading what he says about your life, and you have a better chance of engaging what he has to say about your life. Here's what it will not guarantee if you will do that. It will not guarantee you a problem-free life. In fact, you'll read a verse in there that will tell you it's going to be problems. It will not guarantee that you'll lose 25 pounds. It will tell you how to take care of your body and the importance of the body that God has given you. It won't make you financially wealthy yet, but if you get out of debt and you live in contentment and freedom from debt and being owned by debt, eventually you'll be wealthier than you are. It does mean that if you consistently feed yourself what it says in there, you will move from sand to rock. It's guaranteed. Faced with any situation, any now what, it will be addressed in there. You'll be more inclined to operate out of that. If you make it a habit, you will change. When you decide to intentionally and legitimately engage. This is the most important thing I could ever tell you as your friend, as your pastor, whatever it is. It's saying, I'm going to stand on what God has to say in reading his story. There is great hope there. There is great promise in that decision. You'll change over time. It's just going to happen. You're going to make all of your decisions differently, even your little tiny decisions. You're going to behave differently, not in a classic Christian rule-following, he goes to church kind of way. I'm talking about being compassionate and kinder and softer and sweeter. You'll parent differently, completely. When you start living in the absolute truths of what he says in his book, you will parent differently. And you know what your children will do? They will see you in a different light because you're setting an example for them. It may take years. I have adult kids, okay? It is a long slog through parenting. If you're not there yet, I'm sorry to spoil the end of the movie for you. It is difficult. Why wouldn't you be the most equipped you could be? No child is going to run up to you and say, thanks for all the structure. They're not. But they will at 25, and they will at 30. But you got to be starting from somewhere. You got to be standing on something that matters. You're going to find hope in the hopeless. You're going to find joy. It's not what I do, but where I'm standing when I decide what to do. Guys, let me pick on you a minute. I can do this because I'm a guy. This is really hard for us. It's really hard for us. The determining factor of whether a family will stay in faith throughout is if you engage, if we engage. But this is the most important thing we can do. This is the biggest decision that we can make, and it's the easiest one to make because it's a legacy decision. You will be known for something in your life. Some of you are fathers. Some of you are professionals. Some of you are going to be fathers. You need to hear it from somebody who didn't have a father and somebody who struggled with this for a long time. You have got to stand for something. This is a legacy issue. If you choose this and make this a practice, you will completely change. Your legacy is not your work, your stuff, your team, or your game system. It's what you do with this teaching right here. It's your example. It's the one you show your kids and your spouse and your coworkers and your friends. All right, now the rest of you ain't off the hook. Moms, kids, if you at all think that God is anywhere near legitimate, valid, remotely meaningful, attractive, I guarantee you that if you make this decision to make this a daily practice, you're going to flourish as a human being. There will be no measure to what our church could do in the impact in our community and just within our own families. This is absolutely the thing. You're going to filter those questions that you have through a biblical filter. Now, maybe there's somebody in here who you got dragged in here, or you don't really believe any of this. God is not something that you really can believe in. I would say the same thing to you. That's how I came to it. Read it. The worst thing that can happen is you'll learn the story. The best thing that can happen is that God will start cracking open that door to belief a little bit. Don't you owe it to your life and your legacy to at least give it a shot? And if that's you, I would ask yourself, what if it's all true? What if God is who he says he is? What if everything in here that he says about my life is important? What if he really does love me? If he created the world and he created me, wouldn't it mean that he has my best interests at heart? Maybe what he says can inspire me, believer or not. So I just want to leave you with just a little, like this is very brief, but I want to give you a way forward. What can you do tomorrow? What could you do today to begin to do this? And the reason I'm going to try and knock through this is because I find a lot of people really don't know what to read. So I want to help you with that a little bit. The very first thing I would say, get a Bible. Now, there are all kinds of translations of the Bible out there. They're all very, very beautiful, time-honored. We've chose to use the New International Version. You'll see it referred to as the NIV. This is written on an 8th grade reading level. It's very accurate, so it's easier to understand. Get one. The very next thing you need is you need a plan. You need to figure out what you're going to read. I just got an email from somebody this week. I've been in a little bit of a dialogue with her. She doesn't know what to read. Perfect for this. There's a tool out there. We talk about it every Sunday. We talk about YouVersion, which is a digital app. It's free. And they provide all kinds of, but here's the deal with YouVersion. I took some screenshots of my YouVersion account. You can download YouVersion, but you have to make an account for you to really use this tool. And I find a lot of people don't get an account. So get an account. See my little picture up there. And then all these things at the bottom tell you what you can do. This is a home page. The next one is one that this is where we're at today. And you can read the Bible from your phone. You can have it read it to you if you don't like to read. The next page is plans. This is what I want you to focus on. Get a plan. There are plans in there from 1 day to multi-year. Partial Bible, whole Bible. Topical, meaning you could put a topic in the search and find something, and even have some here that you can hit, and they'll give you a list of different plans that you can choose from. And you know what it'll do? It'll provide structure for you. If you have an account, it will keep you on track. You can even put a reminder. So when you're surfing Facebook laying in bed, it will go boom. Maybe not boom, but it'll remind you. It'll say, hey, jump in. And the last one is explore. This seems a little lame, but it's good. I wasn't feeling all that great the other day. I hit that one. Talked about some anxiety stuff and some depression stuff, some angst things. And when you hit that, it will give you a list of verses that will address those topics. Here's what I want you to do. Maybe this isn't for you. It's a tool. But I believe that we need a plan. You know the answer. Get a plan. Get up. Take the time. Mark it off. Here's the most important thing you can do with this practice. If you were to go in my closet, my little office at home, you'll see a big tub of notebooks. When I read the Bible, something comes to me that I need to see. If I'm reading 2 or 3 chapters, whatever, and I'm reading, I might read, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." And I take that verse, that thing that jumps out, and I don't know what makes me feel like in that moment, those words, that verse, or what I need to read. I believe that God puts us in situations where we're open to hearing a particular thing. I've read the Bible multiple times in my life. I've read some verses hundreds of times, and I always come away with something different. And so it jumps out at me, and it says, this is what you need today. And then you take that little snippet of whatever you read, you can write it down, you can memorize it, whatever. But what I want you to do is I want you to take it inside of you, and I want you to ask God how to apply that. God, I need you. I'm coming to you. You say you love me. I don't know what I'm doing today. I don't know what I'm doing, period. Help me. Amen. Go on with your day. Get up the next day and do it. And then I want you to string as many thousands of those as you can together. And that will become your life. That will shape what you do. I'm asking you to stand on what God says and to make it a priority in your life. So we're at the end of the year. New Year's resolutions are kind of a big thing. And I looked up a pastor, preacher, theologian by the name of Jonathan Edwards, who lived in the 1700s. Very impressive guy. He was at Yale at age 14. And he wrote out his life's resolutions, not as a New Year's thing, but as a life thing. And seeing that we're at the end of the year, here are 2 of them. Resolution 1, I will live for God. Resolution 2, if no one else does, I still will. Those were his resolutions. What I want you to remember is, even though it's 20-something degrees, sand is where we go put our feet when it's warm. It's not what we build a life on. What I want you to do is I want you to build your life on the rock. I want you to consume that book. I want you to remember what I said about how important that is. Then I want you to step back, and I want you to watch what happens. And I wish you a Happy New Year. Let's pray.
Thanks for tuning in to the Forefront Church video podcast. Our hope and prayer is that this has left you encouraged and challenged you in your faith. And you might have some questions and some ways that you want to figure this out, and we want to help with that. Head over to forefrontchurch.info, and there's a couple different ways that you can connect. Click the Connect tab and let us know how we can be praying for you, or a staff member can be contacting you this week. Maybe you have just been encouraged by this and want to support the ministry here at Forefront Church. You can click the Giving tab, as well as other tabs that are in there to help you along in your journey with God. And so we're thankful for you. Thanks for tuning in, and we cannot wait to see you again here online on the video podcast. We love you, and we'll see you then.